Well, I just heard the noon whistle here in Fort Atkinson, so that's our cue to kick this thing off and to welcome everybody out there. This is Steve Larson with the Horge Dairyman staff from up here in our Fort Atkinson offices. As I said, we're glad to have quite a number of you with us today. Great turnout among you participators out there, and it's always nice to have you with us. Just might want to mention here on behalf of Horge Dairyman, we're beginning our 130th year of publication. It's the 130th anniversary this year. And another note that our annual cow judging contest has started as well on the cover of the magazine. But also now you can enter electronically online by going to judging.hordes.com, and you don't even have to send in a placing this year. You can do it online, so we encourage you to check that out if you're interested in that. Feeding cows for transition success is our topic today, and Mike Hutchins from the University of Illinois is our presenter. And Mike, as everybody knows you, you don't go to meetings you don't even need a name tag on. I understand, but anyway, Mike, of course, has been down at the University of Illinois in extension work for a number of years now, somewhat retired, and but still very active both here and overseas in making presentations and consulting on feeding and nutrition matters. And Mike, with those few words, we welcome you and thank you for being with us today, and we'll let you get started with your presentation.
Well, very good, Steve. Thanks very much. Our thanks to Horge Dairyman for sponsoring our program today, Feeding Cows for Transition. It's a fun topic, and we're going to challenge you, and you voters out there, you better start getting ready to vote, because we got some three really tough questions. We had an exciting night here for two reasons. First of all, we had a big ice storm here in central Illinois, and that made some excitement getting here in the morning. And then, of course, we had to watch the Packers last night. And for you Green Bay Packer fans, we want to thank the referees for helping us out a little bit there as well. So let's go ahead and move on. And I think this is a nice place to start and say if you're a dairy farmer or if you are an agribusiness person or educator, how do you help this cow really thrive in this and under this situation here? And here we go, Steve, with our very first survey question. And so it says, which of these options would you rate as number one, the most important thing for successful transitioning cows? And the polls are now open, Jim said. The first one is, do you want to vote for two dry cow groups, far off and close up? Or do you think separating springing first calf heifers from mature dry cows, is that kind of the most important thing in your transition program? Or feeding a low energy dry cow program, is that the most important thing? Or developing a fresh cow pen or strategy and specific ration for that cow? So the polls are now open, and we're off and running at this point. Steve, any comments?
Yeah, I'm going to go with number one there. We'll see how I do, and we'll see how everybody else responds. Although, number four looks pretty good, too. It might be my second choice.
I held up my figures to Jim Balt, so he knows we didn't violate here. Jim, let's close the polls. We got 70% of our votes. That was really pretty fast voting. Our people, can they see that now? Well, interesting, Steve. You were right. It looks like the first group and the fourth group were very, very popular. Separating, by the way, I think all four of these are excellent strategies, by the way. But I think that shows the challenge you as dairy farmers, consultants, whatever hat you're wearing out there, is of how you separate all these things out and go from there. By the way, my choice, Steve, would have been number four, and you'll see why right at the end of the webinar as we go through it here today. So I'm going to hit a key here, Jim, and see if we move forward. And maybe I have to click on my box here, and I think I've got the next. Yep, there we go. So here we go. What's the problem? Well, if you're in my class, you'd have to know that orange word there, broken cows. We define broken cows are cows that leave the herd in the first 60 days after calving. We call them broken because we did something that causes this cow to be either culled or, unfortunately, in some cases, die. And there's two big losses. First of all, we lose the value of the cow. I know culled cows now have value, but still, a dairy cow with today's milk price prices still command a fairly nice price. And then we lose that lactation. We're just saying on many farms, that's 20,000 pounds of milk that we should have marketed in the next 300 days that we don't get a chance to do. Second of all, these transition cows are high-risk cows. And I know years ago when the BST technology came on, the question was, will we ever start just calving cows once or twice and just use BST and extend lactations out for 900 days, for example? And metabolic disorders are, of course, quite costly. This is a fun, interesting slide. We are not going to walk you through this one. It comes from the New York Veterinary School. Got a little age on it, but look at it. It's a big field survey of nearly 5,600 herds, 61,000 cows, and look at the arrows. These are risks, odds. Now, if you go to Vegas, it says this tells you how much money you're going to lose. Or if you want to take a look at it, let's look at milk fever. So if a cow has milk fever, she has a 1.6 times greater risk of developing ketosis, and you can see ketosis happens to be the one that they featured in the research article. But look at the relationships. And the answer is you don't want to be on this. And Jim Drakely several years ago said about every fresh cow has about 55%, 55% of one or more of these occurring in their transition program. So pretty scary PowerPoint. It almost looks like driving around Chicago. So there are choices out there. And we'll let you read this one. We just have a lot of stuff to cover today, but it kind of reflects the voting this morning. Like there's a lot of different choices. And what's the most important thing that we have? And you can see this list here. These are all different choices. Look at the straw one. I found that interesting. I can find your research that says if you feed straw to transition cows 3 pounds, 5 pounds, or 9 pounds, maybe the optimal amount. So that right away, even one technology, there's a discussion of how much straw it should be. And here's an extenuation of that as well. Looking at BMR corn size for close-up cows, drenching, looking at feed additives. So we're going to touch on some of those here as we go through today's program. And in fact, Steve, is a little different kind of program. We decided today to use what I borrowed from a Canadian coworker, a KPI concept. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicators. And by definition, it says this is a very specific, measurable, controllable indicator that allows you to predict, prevent, or in some cases treat potential problems on the farm. And Jim, you did a nice job with our PowerPoint. So we're going to have 10 of those today. So strap on your hats, and here we go. We're going to be rolling through these pretty quickly. Jim Baltz put this together last week. It's pretty cool. It says it's a little bit like driving your car. You know, you got dashboard symbols here. Well, this is Jim Baltz's cow dashboard. And so you can see where the feed bunk is, where milk production is. You can see where dry matter intake is, where MUNs are, and he's even got the warning light going on saying, this cow here with a BHBA value of around 8, the red light comes on and says, be careful, you might be running into trouble. So we're going to look at these KPIs. I would challenge my dairy farmers, my consultants. I would like, if I was consulting on your farm, having all 10 of these that either the farmer gives to me or we collect or we go through records to find it. So here we go, and you're going to see this format pop up for the next 35, 40 minutes. KPI number 1, the number of culled cows leaving the herd in the first 60 days. Now, we can do that right now. In other words, we're now in 2015. So if you got your record systems, you can go back to 2014. And let's say you culled 100 cows that year. Culling includes death losses. If you had more than 8 of those, would have been in less than 60 days, then you have not succeeded on this KPI. Let's take that look at some older data from Minnesota. By the way, there's some parallel data from Georgia and Florida done a bit more recently here, shows the same format. Here you can see in Minnesota DHI, and you can see this is done by Dr. Steve Stewart. You can see another 6,000 Minnesota herds, nearly 2/3 of a million cows surveyed here. Look at this, guys and gals. The first 20 days, 11% of the cows culled occurred in the first 20 days. And then you go to 41 days, another 8%. And then the next 20 days, you pick up another 5%. That's 24%. The black line also is interesting to me. And as we talked about in one of our previous webinars, that is when cows leave herds. And the risk, what's the risk they're going to leave? And you can see there are 2 major risk factors on dairy herds based on this study and also the previous webinar, and that is the first 60 days due to transition program, and the last 100 days because they are pregnant. And we've had some webinars on pregnancy as well. So that's KPI number one. What is that number in your herd in 2014? And ideally, 8% is one that Dr. Gordy Jones has used, and he's been on our webinar series before. But all KPIs are Hutchins biased. Either I stole it from somebody or there's a number I'm going to go with. KPI number 2, and again, if you have questions, just send them on in, and we'll try to answer them at the end of the program as best we can. KPI number 2, it says, what's the dry matter in the close-up pen? So, and now we're using Holstein breed here. So these are our numbers, and for our European colleagues, I put it in kilos as well. I'd like to see a mature cow pen over 30 pounds of dry matter per day. Now, I understand not every cow eats 30 pounds. A cow perhaps within 12 hours of calving, she'll be down quite a bit. But anyway, I want that 30 pounds. That's a number you can get from the dry cow pen. If you've got a heifer springing pen, which I really love, I'd like that number around 24 or 25 pounds. Heifers just eat less dry matter because of their body size and capacity as far as that goes. The number in the middle is one I use in Illinois all the time because almost all my herds, because of their herd sizes, we only have one close-up pen, if we have a close-up pen, and that's going to be 28 pounds of dry matter. Why is that important? Well, this data from Penn State shows you that 1 week before calving, cows start to go into negative energy balance, which means they're going to start mobilizing body fat. And that means now this cow's liver gets to deal with these NEFAs. And if she does it right, hooray for her. If she does it wrong, now she has a problem known as ketosis/fatty liver and other complications. So I want to try to keep that energy bar positive during this time period as well. Here's some Wisconsin data that shows you the relationship between dry matter prepartum, which is your horizontal axis there in pounds, and say we want to be around 28 to 30. And then on the vertical axis is postpartum after calving, the first 3 weeks after calving. And the line, while there are some glitches in around that different studies, you can see a nice straight line relationship there, or at least a relationship showing that if cows eat more dry matter before calving, then they will tend to eat more dry matter after calving. Why is that exciting? Well, here's that same data set looking at dry matter after calving, pounds per day versus milk production. And now you can see a really nice relationship that says, and by the way, that's going to be KPI number 3 or 4, so I'm going to give that away a little bit, but we're not going to come back and look at this PowerPoint. But what a drive home. It says, if we get groceries into these girls before calving, then after calving, they got a better chance to produce more milk. Look at the R squared, you statisticians. 78% of this variation in milk production can be explained by the dry matter intake postpartum. Huge, huge, huge factors. So that's always been a question on some farms. My fresh cows don't milk well. Wow, this could be the answer sitting here right now. So we look at these on these dry cow rations. How much energy do we want? We say somewhere around 16 or 18 mcals. I know Dr. Drakely uses 16. I use 18 mcals, and then at least 1,100 grams of metabolizable protein, which means you need to have a computer software program. I want to get those nutrients to the dry cows. I don't want to have them borrowing from their body reserves in the dry cow program. Number 2, we want to avoid heavy cows, and we're saying anything at 3.5 or greater are too heavies. I know that can be argumentative, but we think we have more risks with heavy dry cows. And be well aware, heifers need to have a slightly higher nutrient-dense diet. Dr. Grummer at Wisconsin, now at Balchem, says about 2 percentage points higher in crude protein for heifers because they don't eat as much and they have a high nutrient requirement because they are still growing along with the calf and preparing a mammary system and colostrum for after calving. Okay, here is just a quick snapshot. By the way, listeners, if you really want to learn more about the high energy ration, go to the Hordes Dairyman archives. And June 10th, 2013, Dr. Drakely has a whole discussion on that. Here is the low energy diet. We had about 10% of you voted for that one there. And you can see this is about a third corn silage, got to be processed, by the way, about a third straw, and the other third is made up of some very important nutrients out there. And some of you that are looking there are going to shake your head. Look at the protein sources. Soybean meal, heat-treated soy, and urea. And that's trying to get that metabolizable protein number right out there in the program. On the right side is a more traditional ration. So why do we want the 8, if you believe in the 8 meg rule, and cows will have a low energy diet around 0.6 mcals, even I, an old guy like me, can see 30 times 0.6, there's your 18 megs. So you can see if you're going to go to a higher energy diet, then the dry matter intake has to go lower on paper. So certainly that is an important concept. And so I'm suggesting that these cows will eat to meet their energy needs, and physical fill will stop her at about 30 pounds of dry matter if she is a Holstein cow. And I think we have other evidence in early lactation with Rumensin. We look at BST technology. A lot of these eating to energy requirements become a factor. And then, of course, the fill factor that goes with it based on Mike Allen's work that comes out of Michigan State. Here's the nutrient specs. I will not walk you through them all. I think the one that really catches my eye is the metabolizable protein. And it catches my eye is because these cows may be consuming a third straw. And if you want to grow bacteria in the rumen, straw is not your big buddy. And so certainly I think that's really important. Dr. Drakely has many more numbers associated with that as well. Okay, moving on to KPI number 3. And some of you I know are going to look at your watch and say, man, he's in trouble, but we'll be okay here. These are Hutchins biases, but what is your metabolic goals? And there they are listed for you. Some veterinarians would argue that 5% DAs is too high. Some of you dairy producers will say milk fever should be less than 1%. These are treatable cases of these metabolic disorders. But the question is, what is your number and what is it in your herd? And Steve, very disappointing. I'll go on to farm visits and nobody has this data. Oh yeah, we had a milk fever, 4 of them in the last month. And you go, well, what is that? What percent of the cows would that be? Or is there a trend, or is there something going on? Just made a farm visit on Friday and the young man said the last 7 cows had to be bottled with calcium. Wow, something's going on out there on that farm. So here we go. Now, that has an economic factor. This comes from Cornell University, and there is a cost. This is for a clinical milk fever. You say, well, where does that $334 come from? That includes milk loss. That includes culling cows, fertility impact, lost milk production, roughly about 1,200 pounds of milk, extra labor, veterinary costs. That's what it costs, and that's pretty clean, and that's been done several years ago. And so my guess is those numbers certainly have not come down at all in terms of cost of that metabolic disorder occurring with those animals. Going to KPI number 4. And I warned you this one was coming. That is dry matter after calving. And that's the beauty of a fresh cow pen, because that's the only way you and I are going to be able to capture that data. So that's one reason why I like that number 4 answer in our survey, and that is because I like to know what my fresh cows are going to be doing. Now, you saw the slide a bit earlier. Now we want to look to the day, the week, 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks after calving. And notice this is the negative energy balance these cows are experiencing. Now, to help us a little bit for some of us producers, what's 8 mcals of energy? Well, folks, it takes about 0.35 to produce a pound of milk. So you can see this is pretty close to about 18 or 20 pounds of milk that first week that cow is borrowing from the bank. Now, if I get more dry matter and more nutrients and more digestibility into my ration, then that bar gets smaller. And that's important when we start looking at metabolic disorders such as ketosis. More about that, KPI number 8, I believe. And of course, you'll notice out there, we know very clearly from some of our earlier discussions in our webinars that cows losing body weight are less fertile. And so you can see using this data set, these are pretty healthy cows. By day 45 to day 50, these cows are finally becoming positive energy balance. Dr. Britt argued years ago that this negative energy balance may have some impact on follicle quality and follicular quality, and he said that's why some of these cows don't show a lot of fertility until 80 to 100 days after calving, is because we have somehow negatively impact the follicle itself. Several of you I know can use BST in your parts of the United States, and of course we know that if cows are negative energy balance, they do not respond to our BST technology, and that's good news for the cow, bad news if you're buying the product as far as that goes. I like this slide that comes from Wisconsin. It says, if we have low dry matter intakes into my fresh cows, what are the risks? And there they are. The red one is very straightforward. Jim did a nice job with the coloring of this. That's what everybody talks about. We'll come back and visit that one a bit later in KPI number 8. Those on the right is that empty rumen. And that's why some of us will actually score fresh cows looking at their fill factor on the left side to see if they're gaunt, meaning that is dipped in, or if it's filled out and full. And then the one on the left is the one that really catches my eye, Steve, and that's immunity. Certainly, if cows have lower energy intake, the immune system may be compromised. And if you want to compromise the immune system of a cow, you don't want to do this in the first 2 weeks after calving, when she has got mastitis risk, she has got leakage, she has edema, she has a uterus that's trying to involute, we have bacteria in there, really pretty scary. So we could have made this the old question on the survey, and to me, the biggest risk I see on dry matter intake is probably immune function. Now, most of you probably wouldn't agree with that, but we'll move on from there. So what should that number be? Remember, we're talking KPI. What is that number looking like? And so this is some work that comes out of the Journal of Dairy Science, done by the Purina Research Farm years ago by Dr. Al Kurtz, and these are very useful numbers. The best numbers I still use there. We have a little problem here at the University of Illinois. Excuse that cough there, sir, and ladies online there. But these are good numbers. What's the take-home message? Look at first calf heifers are much lower than older cows. A real reason to have a fresh cow group out there on the farm, and you can see that they eat less and they come up at a little different rate. So you can see by week 5, my mature cows are really putting away the groceries, where my heifers might be still lagging there just a little bit. Wonderful data. Now, I know this is a very dynamic pen. So if a cow calves today, then she comes in at basically day 1. So the average week in there is going to change. But you know what? The software and programs we have now, Steve, that number is pretty achievable on most farms, even though we realize cows come in and cows come out of that pen. More about that on KPI number 10 here in just a minute. This is the data that I just love to use. Dr. Dick Wallace pulled this together here at the University of Illinois. It's been used by a number of different presenters as well. It says, what happens to dry matter intake in cows that are healthy? And with my cursor there, I guess, Jim, they can see my cursor. He says, yes, you can see my healthy cows in red, and my cows that had DA, ketosis, I call that a metabolic challenge. Look at their dry matter. And then you take a look over here, and you can see cows that have a uterus challenge as far as that goes. This is dry matter intake in kilograms. So for our listeners, our non-metric people, multiply this by 2, and so you can see by week, by a day. And by the way, this is day after calving. So 9 days after calving, my metabolic challenge cows are eating about 20 pounds of dry matter. My healthy cows are going to be sitting somewhere around high 30s there. Huge impact, and you can see why we really want to be tracking this data out. Dick also followed these cows. These are cows before they went into research studies, so this was not a research study. We just monitor our cows. And now you dairymen, let's look at day 9 again. Now I wish Jim is smiling. I wish this was kilograms. This is pounds of milk. You can see by day 9, my cows with a DA ketosis event, they're averaging about 50 pounds of milk. My healthy cows are approaching 80 pounds of milk. Big difference. And look at here at day 21, look at my healthy cows are getting over 90 pounds of milk or close to it, and my cows that have health challenges are still sitting down in the 60 or 70 pound range. Boy, we're in your pocketbook, and of course we are now going to what? We're setting peak milk. It's pretty close at this time period as well. Okay, moving on. KPI number 5. Notice we're in pretty good shape, Steve, time-wise. The strategic use of feed additives. And we could spend the whole webinar on this PowerPoint here, but I put mine into 3 categories. Be keenly aware, those of you that are listening, this is a very heavy bias by Hutchins. You can see I got 4 in green. And here's a new kid on the block added in the last 3 months. We are now recommending chromium. 500 parts per billion chromium to my close-up and fresh cow rations. The data that I have seen looks pretty powerful, and talking to some feed companies, they have seen some nice responses as well. So I'm recommending yeast culture, propylene glycol. Normally that'll be drenched, although you can feed it. Calcium propionate can be fed, or usually it's a drench as well. And chromium, of course, is being fed. The other next three are if you have lots of potassium in the ration, you have milk, a lot of hypocalcemia, anionic products look really good. That is the number we're targeting here. That is milliequivalents per kilogram. Many of you will see 5 milliequivalents per 100 grams. So don't let that trip you up. Make sure you know what the levels are. Here's your rumen-protected choline, your niacin, 3 grams protected, probably another 3 grams raw. And then my third category in orange, that's because orange is Illinois and we lose in basketball a lot lately. Here are your direct-fed microbes. And I think you and I are going to start seeing these popping up into transition programs too, once we know exactly which microbes and how many we have to feed. So the question is, where are you on additives in this type of a feeding program? KPI number 6, strategic use of drench products. And if my memory is right, here comes another survey question. So, Jim, why don't you open up the survey? And I'm going to ask, drenching, you have 4 choices. And, Steve, you get to vote here as well. I drench every cow. That's one choice. The second choice, I will drench selected cows. And you can see the criteria could vary on your farm. Number 3, I drench cows that are not healthy, or exhibiting some health or metabolic problems. Or number 4, I do not drench cows. And the reasoning can be it's too expensive, too dangerous, too much labor, or I'm a Democrat. Who knows? Steve, your comments?
Number 2 looks good to me.
Which one?
Number 2? Second one?
2, selected cow. Is that what Hordes do? Are you drenching cows at Hordes, by the way?
Yes, we do occasionally, yes.
Okay, yep. Occasionally, okay. Very good. And let's see. Close the polls. Holy smoker, 73% of the votes in. Let's show what's going out there. Well, there's a couple surprises here. Steve, you've got it right. Congratulations. That's some of these webinars you don't get them right. Anyway,
but not by much.
Not by much. Isn't that scary? Let's talk about each of these quickly. Drenching every cow. I had one dairyman said, I don't think we have the skills in our fresh cow pen to pick these cows out. And so 16% of you, that surprises me. That's a pretty high number. I'm not surprised that about 6% of the listeners says we aren't going to recommend drenching. And then the other one, Steve, that's pretty close, as you point out, and that is cows that have a problem. That's a little bit like buying fire insurance after your barn burned down. It seems to me that we don't want to wait that long. And so, Steve, you and I are on the same page. We want to go on selected cows. So let's go a bit quicker on that one. And I've got to go. This simply shows a Minnesota graduate student. Maybe he's online. He'd identify himself there. He's aged a little bit. Anyway, here's our drenching. Notice he's using a McGrath pump here. The drench mate is another one. Those are the 2 I tend to run across most here in the Midwest. Here, notice he is hand pumping it so we don't drown the cow, and he's pumping at that point. Here's a recipe that you can look at. Comes from Iowa State, Dr. Jesse Goff. And I will not read this to you. You can pretty much figure out what's going on here. Either sources of glucose or rumen stimulation products, electrolytes, buffers, a source of magnesium, which is really important in these transition cows, and go from there. You can buy commercial products. By the way, this is probably going to cost you $3 to $4. So these products are not inexpensive, but yet take a look at it and make sure you have enough bang for your buck. So maybe that's another take-home message, Steve, and that is if you've got a product, print this PowerPoint out once Jim gets it archived, or write quickly and go and see what your bag delivers. We did this at a meeting 3 years ago, and the product was an excellent product. They said 1 scoop, and once we did the calculations, 3 scoop. 3 scoop is the way to go. So anyway, be sure you have enough product in there to do what you want the product to do. Normally, this will be at least into 10 gallons, 40 liters of warm water. Some people will go up to 60 liters or 15 gallons of water because they really want to rehydrate the cow. So I think that's another take-home message as well. And here it comes. We also have something called a drinkable drench. Steve, when I go to meetings, I probably find only about 10 10 or 15% of my people drench cows. A lot of them do bring water into the fresh cow pen. And by the way, that was my job. 2 5-gallon pails of water, of warm water, my dad made me carry in there and made me really mad when the cow would tip one over. Then I had to go get another one. Anyway, that's another way of doing that. My dad was convinced the cow would clean better if she drank the warm water, and probably that was the rehydration part of it. Make sure, in most cases, guys are just putting water into these cows or gals. Hey, put electrolytes in there. At least put electrolyte and a calcium source in there as well. You may want to flavor it. I think the best flavoring agent is the last one, milk replacer. If you think cows like warm milk, they really do. I've seen where cows had a chance to drink a pail of milk and they'll suck that down very, very quickly. And of course, it's got to go in a solution. It's pretty important as well. Moving on to KPI number 7. And that is a good, solid trace mineral and vitamin program. And we've touched on this in one of our earlier webinars as well. I think there's an opportunity for organic trace minerals here. You'll see what they are here in the next PowerPoint. You got to be looking at milligrams per day. That's what I'd be looking at. So again, when Jim archives this, some of you may want to come back and print off the next PowerPoint. We are recommending 2,000 IUs of vitamin E. I know some nutritionists go to 3,000 or 4,000. Vitamin E is quite expensive. The numbers here are pretty much NRC 2001. Notice the D is held at modest levels. High levels of D can cause other problems. Notice we keep our vitamin levels fairly high into our fresh cow pen as well, because in my view, it's got immunity and cow health written all over it. I would like to keep those levels modestly high also in the breeding pen if I could. That can be very difficult here in Illinois because I don't have those kind of grouping patterns on most of my dairy farms as well. And then drop down to a very modest level down there in cows that are bred because their risk of pregnancy has occurred and mastitis windows certainly should be shrinking as well. This is really a big important slide, and our software rations program will give this to you. The Spartan 3, the AMPS program, the Nittany Lion, Nittany Cow program, they'll give this to you. So these are milligrams of supplemental mineral. I'm not counting the mineral that's in the alfalfa or the grass or other sources there. Notice there are 4 stars there. You can see copper. I would like to have a third of my copper as organic source. Chromium has to be 100% in the United States legally. That's the only legal source of chromium is an organic chromium source. Selenium would be 100% in my books as well, especially in my transition program there. And zinc, again, of another 25 or a third coming from that source. So here as listeners, you have this question that comes to play, and that is, should I use organic minerals and what levels should I be adding to it? And again, a Hutchins bias here. I know some people who go much higher, and I know some people who do not use any organics at all in their program. KPI number 8. And Jim, we're really doing well here today. We are practicing, and I'm 4 minutes ahead of schedule. Steve, I think we're going to have to slow down here and talk football or basketball or something. KPI number 8. And this one, it'd be fun to go through and ask each of you to pick the most important KPI. That would really be fun to do at the end, but we're not going to do that. This one has come on in the last year and a half, and that's maintaining blood calcium levels. And I'm not trying to avoid milk fever. I'm trying to avoid hypocalcemia. And in fact, if you are excited about this as I am, then go to the March 10th, 2014 webinar by Dr. Garrett Etzel from Wisconsin. And he's just, in fact, I borrowed 2 of his PowerPoints. You're going to see them here pop up in just a minute or 2 as well. So we're looking at trying to avoid hypocalcemia. So what is that? And so let's just click on that, Mike, and away we go. This is data that is published in the Journal of Dairy Science. And again, you can see in red, this is a cow that has milk fever. She is down. She is down. The one in green, these are hypocalcemic cows. My dad could see those cows, and he would call a vet immediately. Today, you may go in and drench that cow or use a calcium bolus or something like that. But notice here with the timeline starting here, right just prior to calving, and you can see it takes on these cows nearly 4 or 5 days to come back to the higher blood levels. This is the new line that Gary Etzel developed at Wisconsin. 8.6 milligrams milligrams per deciliter of total calcium. This is not free calcium. This is total calcium. And so you can see from basically 1 day before calving to about 4 days after calving, these cows are very vulnerable to hypocalcemia out there in the program. And what are they vulnerable to? Again, borrowed from Dr. Etzel. And again, coming out of a research paper, 2 biggies: hypocalcemia, and you can see the risks of increase in uterine metritis, postpartum milk fever, BHBA, that arrow that we saw from the Cornell study there, and a reproductive effect as well. The one that really catches my eye, of course, is the second one, because I'm kind of on that bandwagon. I think immune suppression is associated with hypocalcemia. And immune suppression here says reduced neutrophil concentration. That is the white blood cells that engulf the bacteria, and then the ability of those that are there to do their thing are also reduced. Jim really prettied this slide up from Dave Beatty in Michigan State, and it says what's happening with hypocalcemia, and that is those cows that are below 8.6 milligrams per deciliter, it affects smooth muscle. And you can see his slide says 2 biggies. First to the left, you can see it's having an impact on the rumen tract itself, leading to DAs. In fact, if you have a high levels of DAs, hypocalcemia can be a real factor that's causing the DA, and that's scary, affecting feed intake. And that affects weight loss, energy balance, ketosis, fatty liver. You come to the right side, and now I got uterine health. Holy smokers, more retained placenta. We know that can be a factor. Slower involution of the tract, which can lead to metritis. And of course, all those have impact on fertility. Some interesting work out of Missouri, which would be the third box down here, and that would be mastitis, because hypocalcemia has a negative effect on sphincter closing on the teat end. Now think about that for a second. If you think there's a risk of mastitis because the teat sphincter doesn't tighten down as tight as it should, allowing the risk of bacterial penetration and growth, wow, we should have your attention. So let's say a quick word about anionic products. Dr. Etzel in a tri-state nutrition conference proceeding said anionic products really help the hypocalcemic problem on herds. So if you're going to use anionic products, you can see here that we're looking at the calculation. We talked about it a bit earlier. The work at Iowa State is clear. Chloride is the real stronger acidifier versus sulfates, other sources there. No question, you've got to bring the magnesium level up with or without anionic products there. And if you're doing that at least once a week, you should be checking urine pHs for Holsteins and Jersey animals listed here as well. We do have some new, what I call second-generation products. I do not get paid by these companies, but Soy Chlor, BioChlor, Animate are second-generation products. I would avoid ammonium salts. There is some early work saying ammonium salts are cations, and they are positively charged. And I know one company that actually uses ammonia as a factor in their calculating of their DCAD. We want to put 100 grams of calcium. I want 20 to 30 grams coming from an inorganic source. And recently, a nice publication came out here recently looking at calcium sources. Calcium chloride is number 1 because it acidifies along with a very available source of calcium rapidly absorbed. Calcium propionate would be number 2. It does not acidify, but it does bring calcium and propionate, a source of glucose. Limestone would be number 3. So for some of you that have calcium supplementation programs, get out your box, get out your tube, get out your bolus, and see what is your calcium source that you are actually giving to the cow and are using a good one. If you really want to chase that down, you can go to the NRC 2001 in their mineral tables, and they list the calcium availability of different sources in the diet. You may not need to worry about DCADs in heifers because their ability to absorb calcium and mobilize bone is much superior to older cows. And that is why older cows tend to have more milk fever or hypocalcemia than young cows. By the way, Dr. Etzel in his review paper said he thought over 50% of the cows, second lactation or greater, are at risk at hypocalcemia. And of course, if you really want to do some calculations, you use wet chemistry and actually calculate the DCAD using what's in the feeding program. KPI number 9. And again, this one moved into my best 10 list here in the last 3 or 4 months. Again, looking at reducing blood ketone levels in cows. And again, you listeners, if this really excites you, then you want to go to the February 13th, 2013 archives. These are all archived, and go to Dr. Etzel's presentation on ketosis. And this is his PowerPoint, the very classic study conducted at Cornell and at the University of Wisconsin, some very large field studies. You can see thousands of cows over here, and very good production, Steve. And look at here. Look at this one. Ketosis observed. These good managers said, well, in some cases we saw 13, 14, 15% of ketosis when they actually measured it using the Precision X meter. Look at the numbers here. So, that's the old tip of the iceberg as far as that goes. So overall in this study, 46% of these cows were considered having a borderline subclinical ketosis. The meter, you'll see it coming out in terms of millimolar per liter. These are the same meters that some of us use for monitoring blood glucose. If your doctor is suspicious that you might be pre-diabetic, 1.2 millimolars per liter. A lot of the data will be done in 12 to 14, and that will be moles per milliliter, milliequivalents per milliequivalent. So again, 1.2 on your meter, or 12 to 14 if you're using the more traditional approach. Did you see this, folks, down the bottom? 5 days in milk was the highest incidence. So this is occurring very, very, very quickly in these cows. So again, these are, Dr. Etzel's summary from his webinar. He goes through these with a lot more exactness. This would have been a fun one to ask how many of you are using this technology. It's a very inexpensive farm side technology here. We covered this point here. And then the take-home message, Jim and Steve, is, well, what if you find a cow? Well, you drench her with propylene glycol once, twice, until this test says that she is out of the window for risk. And there's some excellent data there that Dr. Etzel goes through on impacts on reproduction and milk yield that are really pretty impressive. There sits your unit over here, and you can see it reports in millimolar. So this would be 1.05, so it's right on the edge. You'll use whole blood. Usually you'll take it from the tail vein, easy one to get, and you can see Dr. Etzel's comment there as well. Well, we're coming down to KPI number 10. And we've got 5 minutes according to my watch, and we are right back on schedule again, Steve. Monitoring monitoring fresh cows. One I used to have in here until I put this one in was stress, and I think they go together. If I want to do a KPI 11, it would be reducing stress on dairy cattle. And we've heard about that from Nigel Cook and some other webinars a bit earlier. Monitoring fresh cows. So here we go, our last survey. So, Steve, get ready. I'll turn the program back to you in a minute here. You get to vote, and it says, which of these fresh call approaches or protocol would you recommend? You only get to use one, or which one is the most important to you. Number one is optimizing the cow's immune system. Number two, moving fresh cows into a fresh cow group pen. Number three, putting fresh cows in the high string. I think, and then you'll see the data on that in just a minute. Or number four, managing health risks, really monitoring these cows over here. So the polls are open, and voting is going slower. I think this is the toughest question.
Well, Mike, you kind of, you were pretty big on that immune health thing today. I might go with number one.
Ooh, I may have influenced Steve. I'm not sure that's good.
You did influence me, but they all seem like good ideas, of course.
Yeah, and I think they are, Steve.
Yeah, number three. Yeah, I'd have to think about that one a little bit. But anyway, how's the voting coming?
Well, we're done. We got a minute of voting.
Okay.
We got about 69%. So the Republicans are a little slower
great.
Today as far as that goes. It's shared. Okay. Well, here we go, Steve. You're right. To me, the one I like would be number two, even though I was kind of campaigning for number one as well. But I'd go with number two. By the way, there are nutritionists and veterinarian colleges recommend number three. In other words, put the fresh cow right in the high group, because that has got the best ration. It's got all the bells and whistles, and these cows are going to start producing 80, 90 pounds of milk in 3 or 4 days. days, we want to make sure we're off and running as far as that goes. A really fun way to do the voting, and we will then move on. Considerations, and on that, here, fresh cows are coming off of a low-energy diet, so somehow we got to make that transition, especially if it's a higher straw-based diet, which is fairly common now in about a third of our dairy farms in the United States. We got to get them into a higher energy diet. Now, the question is, how long? How long should they be there? And I would challenge our listeners. I always hear 21 days. I hear 31 days. I hear 10 days. I think the answer is you move her when she's ready and she's healthy to be moved. That's my answer as far as that goes. I think 31 days is too long if the cow is healthy. And then, of course, you've got this whole question, and this is where it comes from the vet school at Wisconsin. How often do you move cows? From the far-off pen to the close-up pen to the fresh pen to the high group. You know, pretty soon you got everything is in a real disarray. So be thinking about that. Be thinking about that as well. Okay. And so what about that 3 or 4% that Steve was thinking about there just a little bit? And this is some data that comes from Wisconsin. And that is moving cows directly into the high energy group after calving. Higher milk yields, and that's in kilos. So you metric folks out there, 4 kilos is about 9 pounds of milk. Lower levels of beta-hydroxybutyric acid, that is your ketone bodies, which means that these cows had less energy drag on them, higher blood glucose levels, and, of course, a higher energy ration that has higher NFCs and lower NDF levels in that. So, interesting. Steve, I think it was your comment was classy. You said you'd have to think about that one a little bit. Some very interesting data to sort through. Well, it's my webinar, so here comes my biases. I would put my cows in a fresh cow pen with less than 100% occupancy based on beds and bunk size. I want to have at least 36 inches of bunk space for my animals so they don't have to fight their way there. Here we go. And I want a specific fresh cow ration as all possible. Bigger farms can do that. Smaller farms, you could take the high group TMR and then top dress a couple of pounds of processed hay or long hay or 1 or 2 pounds of straw. And here we go, Steve. You may get to end the seminar yet.
You've done well, Mike. We'll let you catch your breath there, and then you can wrap her up if you're ready.
Yes, let's see if we're ready. One way or the other. Fresh cow monitoring. I think what a classic situation. And my great colleague, Dr. Dick Wallace, put this together, and I love it. He called it fat mud. And so he says these are the things you and I could pick and choose from on the list. F stands for feed, A for attitude, T for temperature, M for manure, and UD for uterine discharge. And I love his approach. I'm not sure, Steve, we need to do all of these. In fact, I'm going to ask you to hordes what you are doing, if you are doing there as well. Feed monitoring, you're going to score them. So we're simply saying most of us can't measure it, can't weigh it. The University of Illinois, we can weigh that, but we can't measure that on most farms, so you score them 1 to 4. And so it's a very easy call. You may look at such things as compared to the neighbor, the neighboring cow, how aggressive is she versus the cow that you're zeroing in on. Attitude. A good cowman can do this. Attitude. Now, I think if you watched the Packer game and you're in Detroit, you would have been a number 2. You would have been depressed. But anyway, you move on. So you can do this. I mean, somebody's got to be in front of the cow. But in some cases, you have to be there anyway because you have to be getting cow numbers, unless, of course, you've got a reader of some sort. Temperature. This one takes time. You can look at a rectal temperature. I think in the future, Steve, we're going to have some type of implant or something in the ear tag that you can just automatically just walk by and get temperatures on these cows. And of course, you got to be careful, be well aware of your environmental temperatures, especially under summer and winter times as well. But temperature can be very valuable, but it takes time. Manure, very easy, especially if you got lockups. Because if you lock the cow up, and ideally they should be there no more than 45 minutes, you will normally get at least one defecation in the 45 minutes when the cow comes back from the parlor. And of course, a very easy way to go with that. But again, remember, we're changing diets. So this one gets to be a little bit more subjective. I mean, easy to score, but just because the cow is a 2 might reflect the ration you've put her on versus the if she's having a digestive upset as far as that goes. This one's powerful. This one's powerful. Uterine discharge. We're on a very good farm recently in which they were going through these cows very rapidly, just going in and with a clean glove, a clean glove every time, and seeing what was coming off on the glove. And again, an excellent one. So I think this one in temperature pretty much are pretty telling cases. More difficult to do, but certainly a very, very good one. And you can see the scoring system that's listed there, and you can develop your own scoring system. This is Dr. Wallace's, one of his PowerPoints, and simply shows going through there and some of the numbering, and you can see under UD there's this fat and mud thing, and you can see a couple of the cows are being identified. One case using XNL treatment over there. So certainly nowadays with the software programs we have, you can probably do this electronically, and I'm pretty sure some of our drug companies have these programs available free of charge as far as that goes. Steve, our take-home messages, and I think we got through it. Transition feeding cows is critical, and there's lots of right ways, and there's some wrong ways to do it as well. I think I would challenge my listeners to develop a program. Pick your favorite 2 or 3, 4 or 5 KPIs and go after it and see where you're at. You know, the old theory, Steve, if you don't measure it, you can't monitor it, you can't monitor it, you can't manage it as far as that goes. And I think we'll all agree, investments in transition programs are pretty financially rewarding. Steve, get ready in the Q&A program because we're going to ask you what you're doing at Hordes Dairyman with yours. But at that point, I'm going to turn the program back to you.
Okay, Mike. Well, thank you very much. Masterful job. Great presentation. You have a knack for taking some pretty good data and putting it down into language we can all identify with and put to use. And we thank you again very much. We also want to thank Jim Balch, your co-worker there down at the University of Illinois, for all the work that he does technically and helping with the PowerPoints and everything. And sometimes I forget to mention Patty Hurchin from the Hordes Dairyman staff up here, who works behind the scenes with the webinar series and makes things work on our end of the deal. She's a little nervous today because she's a strong Oregon Ducks fan, and so tonight's the night for that. Just want a reminder to those of you out there, and there are a lot of you. Mike, we had over 150 people on board today. In many halls, we would have had to put up some extra chairs. A real compliment to you and the topic that we had today. Survey will be coming here in a few days. For those of you who were with us today, we appreciate your participating in that survey to help us keep our webinar series on target. And of course, Mike has mentioned this webinar in a few days, and all of the previous webinars will be available on the Hordes Dairyman archives. And we've had over the last 4 years now, 47,000 archive visits, probably 30 to 40 people every day go to our website and access one or more of our webinar series that have been archived, and so we appreciate that interest as well. And as you can see on the screen now, next webinar will be Greg Bethard. He's the Chief Financial Officer of Pagels Ponderosa Dairies up here in Wisconsin, talking about the big dollar decisions. And in March, Jeff Dahl at the University of Florida will present his research and bring us an update on heat stress and dry cows and how, again, Mike, dealing with our transition cows, how to get them off to a good start, even though we have to do some of that during the hottest weather during the year. So, again, Mike, do we have some questions?
Yeah, we got some really good questions, Steve. In fact, we're going to have our listeners answer 2 of them because I don't know the answer to them. But I just want to take 2 minutes here, Steve. What are you doing at Hordes Dairyman Farm with your transition cows? And any comments on what we were saying?
Well, we do have, we do have a close-up group. About 3 weeks for the cows, about 4 weeks for the first calf heifers in there. So we do have a dedicated close-up group. After they calve, the cows go into what we call the hospital pen. Usually there's, in our 500 cow herd, there's 14 to 18 cows in there. That's right now, that group is the only group that's getting some long hay. They get the high group TMR and top dress some long hay. And I think a combination of things that you mentioned before, looking, of course, at feed intake, just the attitude of the cows, the manure, temps most of the time, and the herdsperson walks the cows to and from the parlor, watches their mobility, and just keeps an eye on them for how they do in the parlor, as well as how they are out in the bunks, and watching for some discharges. So it's kind of a combination of things, I suspect, which is fairly common. One thing that we've done in the past is to have some of those electrolyte solutions actually in a tub of solution that the hospital group has access to. No data on that, but it's something that can may be helping the cows with that hypocalcemia that you talked about. So that's about the way it looks on our end of the business, Mike.
Okay, well, very good. Well, here we go. Hang on to your hats, and away we go. We got a lot of questions, and we're going to try to wrap this up by 1 o'clock. If your dry matter is low in your close-up pen and is too low, and your ration on paper looks pretty good, what can you do to increase that? Steve, that one is screaming at me of the environment. In other words, cow comfort, feed bunk design, overloading of the pen. Before though, I would jump to that. I would love to see the ration. I'd like to see what the ingredients are, what the numbers look like in the ration as well. But to me, that one is screaming something other than the ration is limiting dry matter intake, and that could be, as we said earlier, some of those factors as well. The other neat comment is from the UK, and that is we only drench cows that will not drink fresh cow mix in the UK. Great concept. Great concept. So it's almost like colostrum feeding of calves. I guess if a calf will suckle a gallon of colostrum, hooray for that. But if it's a big Holstein calf and she doesn't want to suckle more than 2/3 of it, then you tube the rest of it. So I think that's a nice approach. I think that is a good approach. The only disadvantage is that someone has to monitor to see if the cow is going to drink it, if she spilt it, and then I have to be sure that it's palatable. How do you select cows to drench? For me, that would be any cow that had a history that you knew of. History meaning she had milk fever. This cow had a DA. This cow had a severe case of ketosis earlier. She's at a risk cow. And to me, any cow that's in her third lactation above, I would drench her. I would use that as well because I can't wait. I just can't wait. And so that's what I would do. So I would not drench my heifers, and I would not drench cows that are young cows that seem to be did not have a history of a problem, a metabolic disorder or disease. Another interesting question: are you overfeeding trace minerals if you don't consider the basal ration? That's a Hutchins decision. That's also a Michigan State decision, by the way. And the question is, what is the bioavailability of those trace minerals that are coming from alfalfa and corn silage? We know some of those trace minerals are tied up with the with the fiber fraction in the forage, and you can go back and go through the NRC and read a little bit about that. And so I just come in with those milligrams per day, and I'm going to supplement them. Now I know in some provinces in Canada there is no copper in the soil. I know here in some parts of the Midwest there is no selenium in the soil. Whereas if I'm out in other parts, the western part of the United States, that may or may not be true. So I think the question is well stated, but that's just my philosophy. And so what I am supplementing is the milligrams of trace mineral. And again, if you really buy into that, then the next question someone should ask is, well, if you're using organic trace minerals, shouldn't you feed less than the other? And the answer is that's probably going to be the right answer down the road. Here's the question I can't answer, Steve. Maybe you can, or one of our listeners. Are there now on-farm blood test kits for calcium? I'm not aware of that. So, Steve, if you are, chime in, or if somebody...
No, I'm certainly not, Mike. So.
Okay, so one of your listeners, if there is something available, wouldn't that be neat to have? Wouldn't that be neat? But a lot of vet clinics provide that service. So again, you don't have to send it away to a lab. You may just have to take it into your local veterinarian. If hypocalcemia is associated with failure of teat closure, could cows that leak milk before calving be showing that they are already hypocalcemic? Isn't that a neat question? Where is Jim Spain when I need him? I don't know. Cows leak before calving. I think a lot of that is edema, pressure building up in the mammary gland. But isn't that interesting? So I guess some researcher out there who has nothing else to do, he says, I'm going to take blood samples of cows that are leaking milk a day or two before calving and to see what their blood calcium levels are. I don't think that's true, but I'm wrong a lot. Next quick question. Are there possible effects of extending the negative DCAD in the phase 1 dry cow? According to Gary Etzel, no. The answer is no. The cow does not would not suffer from that. The bigger question I struggle with is that does the cow become less refractory? In other words, she adjusts the pH, and after 3 or 4 weeks, she says, I can get rid of this stuff without dropping the pH down. And so I don't know if I just don't know. But Dr. Etzel said that would not be a problem with like osteoporosis would be in humans as far as that goes. How do you keep weight off stale cows on a one diet TMR? I wish you well. You're exactly right. You can't. And to me, that's why I argue every dairy farm that can do it for me has to give me what I call a fat cow or a low group, and that's going to be 10 or 15% of the cows. I just got to get them off the high group TMR because they're going to look just like me, very well-rounded, if we don't get them out of there. So, and the point is well taken. I don't think there's any way to do it. Now, if you got BST technology and you get cows pregnant by day 60 or 80, I think your risks are greatly reduced. But for many of us, those are really wistful things. Next question. Do you think protected methionine as a method donor for transition cows? Yeah, I think it's a possibility. In fact, there's research going on right now with Dr. Lohr here at the University of Illinois and some companies. I think we're going to see that answered, and I think it's right. So I think there is a relationship between rumen-protected methionine as a methyl donor for transition cows. Now, you have to ask, there's one methyl donor on methionine and there are 3 on choline, and now you start getting to a price relationship, a pricing relationship there too. So I may get some notes on that from Balchem. We'll see where that goes. The DCAD recommendation was presented for pre-calving. What about fresh post-calving? That DCAD should be just flipped. In other words, you want that to be positive. In fact, if you believe in Bill Weiss's, and again, Bill Weiss had just a webinar on potassium, he is raising potassium levels. I'm thinking you're going to have a DCAD sitting probably up around 300, and I think the sooner I get around 300, the better off I'm going to be. And Dr. Dahl will probably in a couple months tell us that you want to be around 500 when under heat stress on these fresh cows. Jersey cows, what percent adjustment should we use for dry matter intake? My thumb rules usually has been 10 or 15% lower, be it, so I'm saying 10 or 15% lower. Boy, Steve, you want to answer that, or
No, not equipped.
Yes, we'll make Steve in the next webinar. So whoever asks that question, you got to come back. He's going to check his dry matter intakes on his close-up pen out there at Horde's Farm because I'm pretty sure you'd have that data. So we go on from there. Wow, I'm losing ground here, Jim. I can't catch up. What other factors could make cows produce small amounts of colostrum besides dry matter intake, energy, short dry period, a lack of the hormone prolactin, decrease in prolactin would probably do that as well. Early calving would be another factor that would come into play. Jim Baltz, you got any other ideas? Steve, any other ideas?
No.
Stress, Jim says. The person already announced, and Jim is clear, he already had mentioned low dry matter intakes, and he or she or they had listed a couple other factors as well. Steve?
No, can't help you, I'm afraid.
Okay. Okay, a really long question. I haven't read it, so now we're all going to uncharted waters. What would you suggest for a small herd who has a tie-stall barn as far as pre-fresh cows locations next to the milking herd? Producer claims moving pre-fresh cows creates too much stress. This herd had a metabolic problem in the past and unhappy with peak performance. Well, I would... My answer, I grew up on one of those farms there. I would develop some type of a way of protecting the pre-fresh cows so she could not steal the milk cow rations, and then I could deliver to her that ration. And in fact, we have a good dairyman in Illinois. He says, you know, Mike, I only got 60 cows. And so, you know, a close-up group and a fresh group, I can't group them there. But he says, you know, I got a garbage can, and I just put that diet in front of those cows, and I dump that in front of those cows twice a day. And therefore, I literally have as many groups as I have garbage cans out there as well. So I think that was his approach. And second of all, I think you got to be sure you got to guard against, because most high-group TMRs, your close-up cows or your dry cows are going to say, holy cow, that's a lot better than this damn straw, and I'm going to eat that stuff there. So you may have to have some type of a temporary divider in there. I'm with him. I wouldn't change them. I wouldn't switch the cows in the barn. I mean, our cows went out every day, and they came back to the same stall every day, and you got to be kidding me if I'm going to tell my cows, now that you're 21 days before calving, you got to walk to the stall at the end of the barn. I wish you well. I think, as Jim would say, that would be stressful. One more quick question. Would we not have knowledge at this point in our industry that leaking milk at calving would have more cows with metabolic problems? Oh, I'm thinking that one through there. Jim, do you want to say anything, or Steve?
Could be a smooth muscles thing, Mike.
Pardon?
Could be a smooth muscle effect.
Yeah, it could be a genetic factor too. Listen, Dr. Timms, he was talking about.
Yeah, if cow's hypocalcemic and she's losing some muscle function, perhaps.
Yeah.
Might loosen up the sphincter.
Let me read the question again so you can all think about it, and you can type in if you want, although Jim's going to cut us off here. Would we not have knowledge at this point in our dairy industry that leaking milk at calving would have more cows with metabolic problems? You know, if you put edema as a metabolic problem, I agree with it 100%. And that's why cows are leaking milk. I say, let's go ahead and milk them. I lose the colostrum. I lose some other factors, but I'd start milking them buggers. And you know what? Two of my best herds in Minnesota, and that's been quite a few years ago, they started milking cows 7 to 10 days before calving because they didn't want to have utter damage and or having metabolic problems associated with that. And of course, their big argument was on DHI, they wanted the cows' calving date to be the date they started milking the cow. And wow, that didn't fly very well either. Finally, I have found that extended exposure to decad rations, you tend to get more udder edema. Interesting comment. Dr. Etzel will argue with you all day on that one because I've heard him being taken to task at that at AABP meetings, and we go from there. We had a quick comment that Jim highlighted here. The DAs and metritises might be the metabolic problems associated with milk. Steve, I think we got all the questions answered. I'm not sure we got them right, but we'll turn it back to you to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. Again, that's the speed round of the webinar, and always interesting to hear these questions come in. You do a great job of fielding them without a lot of preparation, obviously. So we compliment you on that and your webinar in general today. We thank you for that. Also, thanks again to Jim Baltz down there for his support. Reminder to those of you who are still with us about Greg Bethard's webinar coming up February 9th, and Jeff Dahl's coming up March 9th as well. We hope that you will join us at that time. And again, thanks for being with us today. That's all from Fort Atkinson.